Hello friends, my name is Martin, and in today's video what I would like to do, this is part 2 of video 1 with the cards, and in part 1 I showed you how I set up this tool. We are using Void Admiral rules as an example. I would like to provide more examples of different games like Infinite Dark, like 5 Parsecs from Home. But for now, we're using Void Admiral, okay? We could even use cards like this for games like Warfleet's FTL, one-page rules. Very easily, actually. But what I'm doing today is I would like to show terrain and scratch builds and how I use the cards to plan out my campaign and use them in such a way that they're actually a campaign tracker without me having to even make a map. Okay, that's the idea. So in the first video, we went over the star system. We have 2 factions. We have the merchants, which pretty much have an enclave here in this star system. There are 2 planets. We have Lupus, which is tidally locked, and it is the capital world of the merchants. And then we have a liquid world, which we named Neris, which is a world that specializes in aquaculture, and this is a major export product. They also have a Stargate, which allows them to go in and out of the system so they can trade. I mean, they're merchants, right? So that's the lifeblood of the system. Now, each card has a series of planetary and orbital assets. The way these work for a war game is that these orbital assets have to be attacked first. These are going to be one scenario. Now, if I'm playing a longer game, then each card could represent an objective for a scenario. But since I usually play shorter campaigns, what I would do is maybe lump these 2 together. That is the orbital defense. That is what the Dusk Wraiths, our enemy, has to attack first before it can move on to the planetary objectives. And the reason I do this is that I firmly believe that orbital invasions, planetary invasions, are very complicated affairs. The Dusk Wraiths, which are something like space zombies, you know, they're like necrotic. No matter what species it is, when you're doing a planetary invasion, it's going to be a complicated affair. There are different layers of defense that will be in your way when you're trying to attack a planetary system. So this is the easiest way to do it. We have the orbital defense and surveillance satellites. We have an orbital shipyard. Those are targets. And if the Dusk Wraiths accomplish destroying these objectives, these cards are removed. And once they're removed, they get whatever victory points these things are worth, and then they can move on to the planetary invasion. So the card suggests an orbital defense and surveillance satellite. This is what I gave my little planetary defense layer. This is the first layer. And it's a network of automated defense satellites and platforms, can be used to support orbital security fleets in capital worlds. All right, powerful telescopes for surveillance. Now, it so happens that I built quite a few little space stations, all right, and these are all very simply done with caps, a variety of caps. You identify a paint cap right there. We have some like juice caps and mesh. There's a lot of mesh with these. You can see also bits of plastic sprue. And so I made these satellites. I haven't based this one yet. And some of now these are big systems. These are like space stations, right? These are automated space stations that I would use on the tabletop to satisfy this card. And these become the objectives. This is what the wraiths have to destroy. Right now, this one has missile systems, and I like making my missile systems in different ways. I use Q-tips for this with a little bit of mesh in between, and that kind of creates almost like Hellfire missile platforms on helicopters, right? That's the kind of the aesthetic. And then we have some big turrets, and these are capital ship grade rail guns or something like that, some kind of kinetic weapon. All right. Now we could put lasers on these if we wanted to. You know, if you want lasers, you get lasers. The solar panels here, which would be important in this kind of structure. Here we have a long-range communications system. All right. This here is a cap from, and I don't have it here represented here, or I would show you. This is the cap from a little tea light. It was a little tea light that was no longer working, and I didn't want to get the batteries for it because they're expensive. And so I just used a little battery cap, and that became my big dish for communications. Now, maybe these have robot crews in them. You know, I mean, you can do whatever you want. This one represents a very powerful particle beam or laser weapon, right? This is an energy weapon. And we have the little dishes here represented by sequin, which you can get these at Walmart or even the dollar store. And these sequin, I love using sequin for all kinds of things, but especially for radar dishes, you know, and communication arrays. You know, they just work really well. And I use a little bit of super glue to put those together. Most of the heavy-duty stuff is put together with hot glue. It works very well. And finally, you've seen this before. This is my telescope. Okay? So we have a lot of choices here. Now, in a game, I wouldn't necessarily choose all of these. Just choose one or two, and those would be my objectives. They would be in the middle of the table, and we would say that they satisfy this orbital layer. Now, if I'm using both orbital card, right? If I'm using both cards, I want to represent both cards in a single game. Well, my third objective is going to be an orbital shipyard. Now, I like representing these pieces of terrain quite large. Okay, I like them big, and they're usually the centerpiece of my table. So in this case, I may not lump these two together. I may have these as separate scenarios, separate objectives, and separate scenarios. Okay, so I want to show you these markers. These are handmade objective markers, and each of these markers very abstractly represents whatever's on the cards. So this is what I'm calling my terraforming district. We have an agricultural district here, very, very easily made. We have an industrial district right here. So these round components we see here, these large ones, could be reactors. It could be plasma reactors. It could be any number of different things. And then we have here a very large core district, and this is our city, right? This is our main city, our capital city. And down here, we have another abstract little token. And basically, these three tokens represent some kind of colony on a water world. Now, because these industries specialize, or this colony specializes in aquaculture, all these little squares probably represent pools of water that they're using to grow stuff, you know, things like alien algae, or, you know, maybe there's alien fish. I don't know. But basically, that's what we're saying. And then we have these little structures which could represent ports. You know, they could represent tiny little ports. And the round structures are the habitats, the colonies themselves for the people that are working these industries. So with these markers, the idea is you're looking at these things from space, from orbit. We're going to see in just a minute how I arrange them on the tabletop. But one of the cool things is that I can also connect some of these things. We see I leave the little corrugation there, right? And I just insert the piece, and we have like an industrial district that's attached to the city. We can have maybe some agricultural districts that are also attached. So what you can see immediately is that you can actually create a mosaic of these objective markers, and you actually have planet infrastructure. All right. Now, these are very simple to make. This is just cardboard, and then I take these are little sprue bits. So save all of your plastic sprues. This makes great little city markers, definitely. If you want to represent like the infrastructure, even on say a starship, you can represent infrastructure that way. And the reason why it's flat as well, not only because it's being seen from orbit, but because I can place a ship on top of it to represent an orbital bombardment, right? And this way, if the marker is flatter, the ship has a better chance of standing on it, so we can represent an attack on these structures. So I have an idea how these structures could be used on the tabletop to represent orbital objectives. So we're going to see that next, all right? The other materials that I use to build these things are some thick card. This is thick cardboard that I got from a tablecloth that I brought. I make all of my game mats, and so the tablecloth came wrapped in this big piece of cardboard, so I just cut it up. That's excellent for some of these bases. And then this is from Dragonbane. These are the little standy sprues that came with it. This is all cardboard, and that's what I cut up to make these various geometric shapes that represent buildings. Now, I'm not finished painting this yet. I still have to paint some of these things. But this only took me 20 minutes to do, and that's the point, is we want to save time as much as possible. So we're in the smaller studio now. I'm playing hopscotch between studios today. It's actually really hot outside, so I can't spend too much time outside, but I'm going between both studios and working on different things. So this is a simple tabletop setup, okay? Maybe set up for a solo game. There's one of the planets that Julie painted. And we have here, because of our cards, if you remember, the razor clouds. This is how I'm representing them. And this is all glitter. All right, it's very cool. It shines nicely. And when you put RBG light effects, they really come out cool. So those are my razor clouds. That satisfies the fact that this red dwarf is grumpy. It's shedding out a lot of solar flares and storms and things like that. So we're going to put that here as part of our game because that's our star effect. Now, I didn't do the light right now. I'll show pictures later because right now I just want the brightness of the light so we can show things. We have the wraiths over here, right? And I still have to finish these guys. We have a planet. And here is the main target. And actually, this could be a moon, not a planet, but a moon. That would make more sense. And then here's our main planet. We have one of the merchant vessels here, probably the carrier with the fighter wing here in it. And then we have what appears to be a defense platform. Remember, we do have a card with an orbital system network. We could say that this is separate from that card and just say that this little platform is protecting the ground structures here. Now, this is down right in the planet itself. These are the atmospheric processors, and there's 3 of them, so there's 3 objectives. Now, here I have a pile of debris. So the merchant faction is going to have to work on their environmental impact here. They're setting out a lot of debris. There are rules for debris and ships. So this is the way I'm representing it. And then these things, you can move through these things, but it's not advisable. If a ship is forced to move through these things for whatever reason, you take missile hits and you don't have flak to protect you. So these are pretty harsh. And for a final battle where you have more objectives, more challenges, here's a representation of the planet's surface. Now, when I use these kinds of markers, I do like putting my ships on flight stands as well as my orbital platforms because it differentiates them immediately from what's going on in the planet. And I mean, these could represent moons. We can also have objectives. One of these objectives in the moons, depending on what our cards say. We're working with our cards to kind of structure the tabletop. Okay, so by the way, I added some of the plumes of smoke that these processors are unleashing, and that's probably, whatever atmosphere manipulation they're doing, whatever weather manipulation. So that'll represent that. So we could have a couple of merchant fleet ships as well. These won't be very big games when I play solo, but we have the defensive platform, which could launch either missiles or have a cannon. That's something we do during fleet construction to make sure we have all these structures, we have their stats. And all of these things can be customized. Now, there are scenarios in Void Admiral that already have platforms with stats, and really that's all we need, So these are the objectives. There are 3 of them, and the Wraiths are looking to take over these objectives or destroy these objectives in order to destroy the planetary infrastructure little by little. So one way to represent this, and since these ships don't really have bases right now, I can do this. There are a couple of ways, actually. One way is to conduct boarding actions. So without doing any weird house rules or anything for orbital bombardment, we can say that we do boarding actions. Now, boarding actions, the player that controls the planet, the defending player, is going to roll some dice as well. Whatever hull these structures have, we have to give them hull points. That is what the number of dice that we use in the boarding action. Now, for these guys, the boarding action is going to represent the soldiers on the planet that are protecting the terraforming infrastructure. The boarding action that's coming out of the ship is representing all the drop ships and troops that are going planet side, right? And you just do a regular boarding action. You follow the rules for the boarding action. Whoever wins, whoever that causes the most damage is the winner. Then if the ship wins, the objective is won. If the ship has lost, then the ground forces have been decimated, and basically the terraforming infrastructure remains intact. Okay, that's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to have the ship come close. Remember, I measure from the middle whenever they don't have bases like this. I just measure from the middle of the hull. And I simply conduct missile strikes. Okay? Missile strikes representing, missiles that are going down in orbit into the planet. So these are specialized missiles that'll survive orbital reentry and then, plunge down into the planet, just like an ICBM would. And the structures themselves would have flak. And the flak would represent whatever anti-missile structures are here to protect the terraforming industry, right? So if I destroy the armor completely, if I destroy the hull completely, just like you do in any Void Admiral, with any Void Admiral ship, then the target is destroyed. The processor is removed, and that's destroyed. You could represent that with a big explosion. Now, the other way that we can represent destroying these objectives is having bombers. Ships that have hangar bays can have bombers. And so these bombers usually have an 18-inch range. So, I mean, they can go a long way. This ship doesn't have to get that close. In fact, it could send bombers, as long as it has line of sight, can be all the way here, send bombers, soften up a target, or even destroy one of these using bombers. And then when it moves close enough, it can use its boarding action the way we describe the troops. So there are 3 ways you can use to destroy ground targets in a space game like Void Admiral using the very rules of the game without having to make any weird house rules. The next thing I want to show is a representation of the orbital shipyard. So this is a very generic representation of a space station or shipyard. All right, and I would use this to represent different things. Now this is completely modular. All these things come off, and it makes for easier storage. So all of these things come off, and these stems are where ships can dock. Now, I also use a piece of terrain like this, and sometimes I put it right in the center if I want to have a 3-dimensional objective in order to destroy the station. I could also lift it. I put something underneath and have the station kind of up in the air a little bit. I can put a planet under it. It's a very cool way to represent a space station, and I'm going to be making more of these because they're very useful. The other representation, I thought it'd be fun to use a Necron monolith to represent the drifting city that the Wraiths are using. But the pictures on the cards are really arbitrary. They're just there to give the card a little bit more interest. The terrain does not have to represent what's on the picture. So I have another idea for a Wraith city, and I'm going to be making one, but that will be important to represent these cards. Because when it's the merchant's turn to go on the offensive, on the campaign track, they will get to attack one of the Wraith objectives. One of them is one of the 2 drifting cities will be an objective. Okay, so for the merchants, that's going to be an important representation. Now, we also have a Stargate. As you saw earlier, there is a Stargate that is connecting the system. Now, this is very simply made. It has all this structural detail. It has some energy that's swelling up in there. And this is also not the full gate. But the idea is that the ships would go through here and they would be shot out into whatever star system the gate is pointing in. Now, probably another gate on the other side. That's what I would say. Now, this thing has a ship attached to it, and this is a heavy tug. Not a pretty ship at all. Okay. In fact, a very ugly little ship, but it's a space tug that's also used for rescue and salvaging and all that good stuff. But when it attaches to a gate, usually these heavy tugs, which are about the size of capital ships, will attach to these gates, and that's they will, under very controlled burns, calibrate the gates, and be sure that the gate is where it's supposed to be in space. I'll probably add another tug on the other side. Now, when big super freighters come through, these ships would probably detach and then attach to the big freighters to help guide them into the gate. So, I mean, these stargates are a pretty fancy and pretty difficult affair to get to work. Okay, so just to make the point, we have razor clouds represented by this scatter terrain. Okay, so these are razor clouds. It represents that environmental factor. We have the terraforming facility with a card right underneath it. We have the industrial facility, which also has in the industrial district, which is the card underneath it. And then we have orbital defense and surveillance satellites. We have all this stuff here. And then we have a core district, which is represented by that piece there. And that's how we represent our cards. Now, for the shipping lanes, I have several of these ships. These are freighters, and these can form a convoy. And so if the shipping lane is attacked, then we have a means of setting up a tabletop that represents that. We have a convoy for the middle of the table and any kind of star effects we might want to add. For this card, for the different solar windstorms, I would say that ships can only recharge to half shields, rounding down. That's it. Pretty harsh? Yes, it is. Red dwarfs can be pretty harsh. It's all right. The actual document's going to be up soon. I'm still writing. It takes time to get all these things done. And then Julie has to edit all of these things. So it's going to take a little time. But it's going to be up soon. All right? Thank you very much, folks. And thank you for your support. Have a great one.